I want to start by going through how you're building React apps today, some of the things that you're used to, and then some of the new things that are happening in React 19. And I'm actually going to start with a Vite application. Client side only, we're not going to do any server rendering or use any frameworks here. So I've got a vanilla Vite application. I'll just show you the Vite config here using the SWC plugin for Vite. So I've got a form and I've got a list of items. And in my form, I have a submit handler. So I have some event handler to submit the form. I have one input, and then I have a submit button. This probably looks familiar to you if you've been writing React code for some time. The submit function here, handle submit, has the event to prevent the browser from reloading. We prevent the default. We get the value of that new item, and then we update the items that are in this local React state. So I've got React state here. I've kind of seeded it with this initial state, and then I can get the items and I can loop over the items. So let's start this up. Now this is going to look pretty boring for those of you who have messed with this before. I have a list of things, and if I add things to it, hello world, it updates, right? Pretty simple. This is kind of the React 101, but this is all local state, right? Everything is stored in use state locally. So if I reload the page, all of that state is gone. It's not being persisted to a database anywhere. And we probably want to do that, right? We probably want to store some of that information somewhere else. So I wanted to just ground ourselves in how we're building React apps today to start to transition between the different features that are available in React 19 and then how we can better take advantage of the server. So we've got these event handlers. We need to fetch some data at some point to populate this list of items that we're seeing here. So we're going to need to do that in a use effect. But let's start talking about some of these React 19 features. So we can kind of quickly get rid of this app today file. I just wanted to show that for a second. So the entry point into my Vite application, I'm going to the root element and I'm rendering out app. So let's get rid of app today. And I'm just going to delete this file. We can look at our index.html if you're curious what I'm building under the hood here. It's just a very simple HTML template that has our root element that we're rendering into, and then the compiled code for our React app. So now we're rendering out this new app component. And let's take a look and do a little bit of a diff of what we're working with today. So I still have my local state, right? But I've refactored my component into this to-do list. The to-do list takes in some items. Right now it's just local state. And then there's the function to add an item. Now this add an item, we're going to come back to this, but let's go look at the to-do list. So the first change that I've made is I've moved from a event handler to this new action prop. Now, if you've been watching my channel or any of my videos, you might have seen me talk about actions before in the context of Next.js. One of the great things about React 19 is that this same paradigm, this same way of building with React works for both the client and the server. So in this Vite application, I'm not using a server. This is all client React. I have a client action. And that means that just like I have this input and this button to submit my form before, when I look at this form action here, all I'm doing right now is just I'm calling this await item function that I passed in, and it has the form data. Now, the nice thing here is rather than having the event handler where I needed to prevent default so the page didn't reload, and then I had to get the actual value from the form, when I have the form data API, I can just .get to get the value based on the name. So the name is item here, and I get that value, and then I update set items. So I update state again to get that working. So another item, wow, it works. Now, again, same as before, still local state, but there was one nice UX improvement that we got for free. One nice UX improvement, one nice developer experience improvement. The UX improvement is that my form cleared out the input automatically for me on submission. So, wow, I didn't have to make a ref, attach it to the element, and then reset it. I didn't have to do that. So the actions will just do that for me. which is kind of nice. The second thing, the DX benefit, is it's just less code that I have to write. So I feel like this pattern is a lot easier for me to reason about. And I like that I can just get the form data directly from here. So that's pretty nice. I'm a fan of that pattern, but still, we're not actually persisting to a database anywhere. We're not reading items from a database, and we're not saving items to a database. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to first demonstrate something, which is this save item function that we're calling. It's asynchronous right now, but it's not actually doing anything. What if we had some delay here of 2 seconds or 3 seconds? So I don't know if you heard my mouse click there, but it was, it was a little slow. We're simulating some network latency here before we've actually added in the network. And this is what the user experience could look like if I'm on a slow device, or if I have, inconsistent network speeds, or if it just takes some time to actually persist that item to my database or to data storage. So that's just something to be aware of. Okay, I'm gonna go back to here, and we're gonna take a look at a few changes that I've made that I've kind of scaffolded up, but we're gonna need to actually make some code changes here to talk through how this works. So rather than reading the items from local state, I just got rid of these. I can even get rid of this comment if I want to. So the initial state is an empty array, but then I have a use effect that runs when the component mounts. And inside of here, I've got this function I'm calling, fetch items. This asynchronous function goes and it calls get items, and then it updates React state with the result that I get back from that. Now, if you've been in the React ecosystem for a little bit, you might have seen some React hook libraries that help make this easier, like a React query, Tanstack query, SWR, or so on and so forth. But you can always do it through use effect, although there are some caveats to this approach and maybe some reasons why you wouldn't want to do this. And we'll show what the UX looks like of doing that. But we call this get items. What is this? Okay, so I've got export async function get items. I go and make a fetch request to some API somewhere. So right now I've only been concerned about the client. I haven't done anything on the server. But to actually get that data from a database, I'm gonna have to do that somewhere. So depending on how my team's structured, depending on the type of app I'm building, maybe I can't have control over the API and I'm just kind of throwing it over the fence to somewhere else. Maybe. In reality, I think for a lot of the apps that I'm building and for a lot of people, they have the ability to actually control the front end and the back end. So get items, going back to here, we have get items, then we update the list of items in state. Okay, that all seems to make sense. And then inside of here, we're going to list out the items. We're going to ignore the optimistic point for a second, but yeah, this looks fine. So the question is, going back to here, where is this API? And how can I actually write that code to go fetch data from the database? Well, so far I've just been running my Vite application locally, my client-only app, but I actually have built a little API that we can use. So I'm going to start up Vercel Dev, which is just the local CLI to be able to talk to an API. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of items here. And I mentioned, the UX there's a trade-off here. Because initially we're seeing an empty page. The client-side JavaScript is loading. We're running use effect. And then we have this waterfall to go fetch the data from our database and load the items on the page. So this API items, where the heck does this thing exist from? Where did this code come from? Well, one of the cool things with Vercel is you can just write APIs on your local machine here and then deploy them to Vercel. And since I'm using a client-only framework here, I don't have any way to take advantage of the server. So here's what this API looks like. It's very simple, but it helps demonstrate kind of how this works. So I have this single API. It talks to my Postgres database. When I make a GET request to it, I'm able to fetch all the items back from my to-dos table, and then I can return them as JSON. And when I make a POST request to it, I'm able to get the text value from the incoming request and do an insert on my to-dos table, and then return a new response that we created some to do. So really very minimal API that we've surfaced here, but it gives us the backstop for how we're actually able to go fetch these items. So I've kind of got two different worlds here. I've got the client world, it's going over the network to the server world, and then I get those items back. Now, inside of here, going back to this form action, if I go up to here, again, just ignore the optimistic part for a second, but I've got this add item function that we call, we give it the form data, and we go back up to here, add item, okay, await save item, and we pass in form data.get item. So the only difference here is that now we're calling this save item function. Save item is, again, going to go over the network to API/items. It's a post and includes the text, and that's pretty much that. So let's give this a shot. Hey, nice. So this actually works when we're saving data to our database. If I reload the page, I see that it's persisted. Now, what happens sometimes if you have slow internet, like we showed before, and you want to show some instant feedback to the user, React 19 is giving you this new hook called useOptimistic that allows you to show some UI before that action has completed. So going back into here, let's start to break down some of the changes that I've made. So I pulled in this new useOptimistic hook, and it gives me back two options. One, I can read the optimistic values. And then two, I can have a function that I can call to update what you're seeing on the screen. Now we give it the list of items from the server, and then we have this reducer, we have this function, given the old state, given the new state, merge them together. And you'll notice when I call form action, I go up to here, and I'm able to immediately, before I await going over the network to add the item, I'm immediately updating this state optimistically so that I can see the new value. So when I scroll down, I'm no longer reading from items, the source of truth from my server. I'm reading from optimistic items, and that gives me the ability to read this new property called sending. And if it's sending, we get to show that message. So notice that when I post this, we see the sending directly after it before we've waited for that database call to finish. And right now, this is pretty fast. It's not that big of a deal. But if I just artificially slow this down even another second, and I go over and I throttle our network here, let's put this on even just fast 3G. We'll say we'll just say use optimistic. When I hit enter, we're going to see that we immediately see it. We see sending, and we're waiting for that network round trip to complete and actually update and persist this to the database. Previously, React didn't really give you these utilities to be able to work more efficiently with the server. And one of the great things about React 19 is that this hook for essentially doing some work on your UI, waiting for it to complete, but still showing something to the user immediately, is now a built-in part of the React model, which is really powerful. This is, of course, a to-do list, but you can do some pretty advanced things with this hook that are all based on the same primitives, the same ideas as what we've shown here. At a really high level, that's useOptimistic. That's how you can fetch data actually from a database, persist data, and some of the advantages that you can get by using this hook versus just, hoping that your network speeds are fast. So now I want to take this client-only Vite application, and I want to show what it looks like to actually move this into a Next.js application, how we can get out of this world where we have these two different programs, our server program and our client program, and I want to merge them into one because for me, I'm building in this kind of unified application. I don't have a separate team building my backend. I kind of want to just do all of this in one app. So let's do it. All right. First things first, I need to install Next.js. So I'm going to add Next, and we're using the source folder, which is fine. We can continue to use that if we want. But in the Next.js app router, you also have this top level app folder. It can be nested in source if you want. It doesn't have to be. The entry point into a Next.js application, this is a server framework where you're doing server rendering. So rather than having this separate index.html, that's like the initial thing you see, and then you load up the client.js and then you see your React app, you get to return back some initial React code, some initial JSX from the server. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a layout, and then we're gonna have a page. So the layout is going to be like the initial shell of our application, for example. So we got export, default, function, root, layout, and that's gonna take in some children, and this is going to be HTML. We're gonna give it a language of English, and we're gonna have a body tag, cool. That's just like your most basic initial template from the server. And if you look here, like it's kind of the same thing. We have HTML, language, English. Next.js is gonna set up some of the meta tags for you by default, like the character set, the viewport, and then maybe I also want a title. Well, the way you do that here is export const metadata, and you have this metadata object, which I don't think I wanna call it root layout, but sure. We could call this Next.js app. What else is in here? The other thing is the actual element that we're putting our app into. So this main, we don't need to do any of this. Next.js is gonna set that up for us. So we can just delete this file, goodbye. And then the other thing is the actual script tag, and Next.js is gonna hook up the script tag as well for us and do some optimization there. So we don't need to do that, so we can delete that file. So we're 2 files down, not bad. Okay, now let's go back to here. This looks fine, our layout's fine. Then the page is the entry point into our index route. So localhost 3000 is the index, and this is what component is gonna get rendered under that route. Next.js app router and the pages router have file system-based routing. So you just put your files in folders, you denote them with this page special file name, and that's how you actually scaffold your routes. So export default function page, you know, it looks something like this, basically. You have these functions, and then you get to place code in there. So that's fine. Let's go back over to here. I'm just going to, let's copy paste all of this. We're gonna dump it in here. We already had an export default function app. We're just gonna rename this to page so we can get rid of this. That all looks fine. So I'm gonna delete this file. I'm gonna move this actions file over to app. Okay, and now I can get rid of source. So this is we're starting to cook here. We're starting to look better. But the entry point into my Next.js application is a server component. And with a React server component, then you have the ability to fetch data on the server, almost like a server template, and use that to be able to influence the initial HTML that you see on the page. So if you remember, one of the UX bugs, nits with this was that you first saw the empty HTML tag, then it loaded the client.js, and it had the waterfall, it made it fetch over the network, returned back the list of to-dos, and then it showed the list of to-dos. Wouldn't it be great if I could use some kind of server framework, whether it's Next.js or others, to be able to fetch that data, include it in the initial HTML? So that's what we're going to do here. You can imagine that we have this page, and we just want to mark this as async. We want to fetch some data here. Really, like, this is the line that we want, but I don't really want any of this use effect or any of this local state. I don't want any of that. I just want to items, await, get items, and go and do the thing. And we don't have any React state here, so we'll just get rid of that. And we're gonna get rid of that too. Okay, so this is like the most basic page, and we're still going to need to forward these along from the server to the client. So if you've used the Next.js pages router before, you can think about this kind of like get server-side props. I have some data fetch, and then I forward the data from server to client. So this is all server-side right now, but this thing up here is going to be client-side. So let's refactor this to make this a little bit more clear. And it's client-side because I'm using a hook, useOptimistic, that requires using the client for that immediate interactivity. So let me cut this. And we can go here. I'm going to make a new file. We'll call this todo.jsx. I'm not even using TypeScript right now. I'm just going wild here. We're going to see how that works out for me. My luck is it just won't work at all because I haven't been getting my TypeScript hints. Normally I use TypeScript for everything. Okay, async function page, get items, to-do list. That all looks fine. I think we can save that. Before I go any further on this, I want to just pause and I want to talk about get items, because get items, which was in actions before, was going over the network. But I don't need to go over the network anymore. I can just go to my database because I'm in a server framework. I'm in a server environment. So what if we took all of this and we deleted this folder, goodbye, and we just pasted it directly in here. So now this get, we're just going to get rid of that. Okay, that seems fine. And we go get the items from our database, sure. And we return them back. And I don't even need to use response.json. I can just say return items, sure. Okay, that all seems fine. And then this, what I want to do is basically what we're doing here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to come back to the save item here in a minute, but save item is going to take in some value. We're going to probably need to tweak this a little bit, but it's fine for now, at least we've got the get items figured out. Okay. Now, let's talk about this again. So we have our page, we have our to-do list. Let me actually save this, even though I know it's busted, and let's see if my editor pops up. No, it doesn't. Maybe I need to rename it. Export function to-do list. So it takes in the items, and then we're going to have some function that's going to basically call our server. So I'm just going to cut this. And what we're doing is we're calling this action, add item here, but really we needed to call save item. So we're going to update this to call the action directly. Now, previously that client action was calling our network and going to our separate API. But wouldn't it be great if we could do this with the same programming model, but just kind of stay in the server environment and write our action on the server? And the answer is we can. We can do that. So we're just going to do this for now. We don't need get items here. Don't need any of this. We're getting closer. We still got our action. We've still got these. This all looks fine. Okay, maybe my auto, okay, there we go. Auto import's working there. So now we're closer. We're closer. But going back here, when we called this action, we still need to tell our bundler that we need to scaffold an API so that it can call. This is basically like an RPC call, a remote procedure call. We need to go and actually take a portal into calling this server function. So the save item thing is what we call a server action. So much like a client action where you can use the action prop and you can call these functions, we need a server action, and that's denoted by the use server directive. Now, the counter in some ways to this, we use the server for an RPC to go grab our data. But this thing, it's using useOptimistic. This is a hook that's only available in the browser environment. So we need to tell our bundler that this is actually a client component. So right now, if we're not doing anything, right, this page is a server component and it renders the to-do list component, which means that this is going to be a server component, unless we mark it to our bundler and we give a signal that says, hey, this is actually use client. So now we have the ability to use this useOptimistic and use any other client-side interactive hooks that we want from here. But you might be wondering, okay, so I had a page that fetched data. This was a server environment. I went and fetched that data. I forwarded it. I went over the network. I made a script tag for my to-do list, and this was some client-side code. Now I've got React in the client. But then on here, I needed to go the other way. I needed to go back to the server to call save item. And that's what the bundler and what the React server frameworks are doing for you here is you're able to import these server only endpoints, these server RPCs, And the bundler says, hey, you said use server, so actually turn this into an API that I can use. Now, this is like a little messed up here, so we're gonna change this because it doesn't take in text, it takes in the form data, and it's called item. So actually we want, we want that. Form data.get item, insert to-dos into text, and return text, but I think we can make even that better. Also, just for best practice, typically we call these functions, their suffix is action, so I'd actually want this to be save action. Okay, we'll go back to here, call this save action. Okay, now there is something here that I want to mention, which is I have server actions in here, but I'm also doing a bunch of other stuff. I'm doing data fetching, which is not an action, and I also have my database stuff too. So it's kind of a little confusing. I think ideally the way that I would write this would be a new file like db.js. I would go in here, I would take this, I would make this our SQL instance here to connect to do our tag template literals. This is going to connect to our database, and I'm going to put it in this file. And then there's this dependency called server only that you can use. And server only is going to allow you to ensure that this code only ever runs in a server environment. And if you're trying to do it somewhere else, it's going to blow up at the build step for you. So just a little bit more security here in your application. So this code can only ever run on the server. That looks fine. I think I also need to install React at RC, React DOM at RC. I don't know if the versions are linked up right. Oh, and PNI next at RC. So Next.js 15 is out right now, which is the release candidate, which also syncs up with the React 19 release candidates. So if you want to use it, it looks like this is the specific version that we need to be on. Cool. By the time you're watching this, maybe this will be already stable. I guess we're going to find out, but I've got those correct dependencies. Okay, db.js. So now I can go into here, and instead what I want here is to be able to, well, nope, okay. Import. Yes, well, actually, was it? No, it was a named. So import SQL from DB. Okay, so now this is in this like separate file, which it doesn't have to be, but it's nice in my opinion. But then I've also got this, which this is not a server action. This is just a function that's fetching data from our database. So I would personally, the way I would structure this would be to just get this out and put it into here, so that it's a little bit more clear that this file only contains server actions. If you put use server on this, it doesn't do anything, right? Because I'm using it here, which is not a server action. This is a server component. So now instead, get items, we're in, if I had TypeScript, this would be easier. Maybe I should set up TypeScript while I'm here too, but now get items is in DB. So that all looks fine. Okay, lightning fast recap of what we've done here. I can delete my Vite config. I don't need that. I can go in here. I can get rid of this. I've got Next, Postgres, React. Get rid of Vite here. I can do next dev, next build, next start. Okay, that all looks fine. Let's make sure my deps are installed. I might need to change something with my git ignore, but this is mostly fine. So I think I've kind of got everything moved over from a client-only React application. I've got rid of my use effect. I've got rid of my client action and moved it to a server action. Let's see if this actually works. I don't know if it will or not. We're going to find out. Let me put normal network speeds back on, at least for right now. Okay. So let's see. Initially, it looks like it's working. So that's good. I've got my list of to-dos. And when I reload the page, I don't have a flicker of content. So the initial HTML that's being returned from my server also includes these list of items because I have my server component that's going and fetching items from my database, and it's including them in that initial HTML. Client components, so this to-do list, client components are also pre-rendered. So they're also included in this initial HTML. It's just that they also have a script tag so that you can add more client interactivity. So that's why I'm able to see these here. So this all looks fine, but does it actually work? Okay, so it somewhat works, but you might have noticed that something looked a little bit off there because we added it and then it disappeared. And then when I reloaded the page, I saw the new data. Why is that? So we went from this environment where there was kind of two different worlds. There was a client world and a server world. And we went to kind of just one integrated environment that spans both the client and the server with a full stack framework. And what happened is inside of here, I called save action. I added this item to our database, but I didn't tell Next.js or I didn't tell my server framework, hey, actually, we've done some mutation. We've changed some data and we need to update that information. So here, what I would actually want to do is call revalidate path. And this is going to update the Next.js cache to say, you know what, for this route, we're going to go ahead and we're going to update that when you do your mutation. So how about now? And what I want to show that I think is interesting, so I'll hit add. Okay, so now you'll notice there's one network round trip here. So in one network round trip, my server goes, it updates the database, it revalidates the cache, and returns back the new UI all together. It's all in one atomic operation. And that's how I get back this new value for how about now. So I got to do this kind of same pattern. It's like the same programming model that I was used to on the client with actions, with useOptimistic, but also dip in and use some of the server features that are really, really powerful. And it's just great that that's all part of React now. Watching the transition from the Vite app to Next.js was helpful. I'm glad that was helpful. I think for me, the biggest thing in seeing that is it just helps you, it helps me understand more the point of doing a full stack framework, which it's not the right thing for everyone or every application. Sometimes you have a separate API somewhere else, but it also shows that React 19 is really powerful, even if you're on a client side Vite application only. Like you still get to use client actions. You still get to use some of these new hooks like useOptimistic, which I think is really, really helpful.